The camera would cut to a tense garage, shutters half down, mechanics speaking in hushed tones while the hum of tire warmers fills the air. Then, a sudden flash of movement, gloves slammed onto a workbench. Voices raised, and at the center of it all, Marc Márquez, a champion known for absolute control, now visibly wrestling with something far deeper than machinery. This is not just another injury story. This is a fracture that has rippled through the paddock, unsettling the very foundations of the 2026 MotoGP narrative. What initially appeared to be a routine post-crash recovery has, in reality, exposed a far more volatile situation behind the scenes. Marquez, fresh off securing his 7th world title in 2025, has admitted to a level of emotional and psychological exhaustion that few in the sport have ever heard from him. The crash at the Indonesian Grand Prix, triggered by contact with Marco Bezzecchi on the opening lap, was brutal enough in physical terms, resulting in a fractured collarbone. But the real damage, it seems, has lingered far beyond the bone. Inside the paddock, sources describe a noticeably heated atmosphere in the weeks following the incident. The garage environment, usually a place of calculated precision, has reportedly been strained, tension not just around results, but around Marquez's condition, expectations, and the pressure of maintaining a championship-winning structure. Ducati engineers, already navigating the complexities of accommodating Marquez's aggressive riding style since his 2024 switch, are now dealing with an unpredictable recovery timeline. 6 months on, the physical recovery remains incomplete, but it is Marquez's candid mental state that has truly sent shockwaves through the MotoGP world. Speaking on the podcast Tengo Un Plan, he admitted to something unprecedented in his career. A loss of desire. I felt empty. I didn't want to ride a motorcycle, he revealed. For a rider whose identity has always been built on relentless competitiveness, that admission lands heavily. This is a man who has ridden through pain barriers that would sideline most athletes, yet now finds himself confronting a different kind of limit. Even more striking is his reflection on clinching the title in Japan. Rather than vivid recollections of triumph, Marquez describes fragments, moments after the fact, a delayed emotional connection. It suggests a rider operating on instinct and obligation rather than pure instinctive hunger. The idea that he considered taking a holiday instead of racing, a first in his decorated career, underscores the depth of his internal conflict. From a competitive standpoint, the implications are enormous. Within the VR46 camp, team boss Pablo Nieto continues to publicly back Marquez as a title contender, pointing to his proven ability to rebound under pressure. Yet former MotoGP race winner Carlos Chetza has taken a more cautious view, openly questioning whether Marquez can realistically sustain a championship challenge in 2026. His assessment, that it would be surprising to see Marquez finish the season on top, reflects a growing sentiment in the paddock. The upcoming Spanish Grand Prix is already being framed as a critical benchmark. Not necessarily for outright results, but for signs, body language, race rhythm, and above all, intent. Can Marquez still access that ruthless edge that defined his dominance? Or has the combination of injury and mental fatigue shifted him into unfamiliar territory? The reality is this. MotoGP has rarely seen a champion at such a crossroads. Marquez is no longer just fighting rivals on track, he is navigating recovery, expectation, and a recalibration of his own mindset. The paddock may be tense, the garage may be running hot, but the bigger battle is unfolding within the rider himself. And as 2026 approaches, one question hangs heavier than ever. Can Marc Márquez still be the force that once bent the sport to his will? Or are we witnessing the beginning of a very different chapter in one of MotoGP's greatest careers? What makes this situation even more compelling is how those closest to Marquez are adjusting their expectations in real time. Within his inner circle, there is no panic, but there is caution. The priority has quietly shifted from domination to sustainability, a subtle yet significant change for a rider who has built his legacy on pushing beyond limits others wouldn't dare approach. From a technical perspective, Ducati now face a delicate balancing act. Marquez's riding style, late braking, aggressive front-end loading, and constant search for the limit, demands absolute physical confidence. A compromised collarbone doesn't just affect strength, it alters braking stability, corner entry precision, and the rider's ability to save front-end slides. Even a marginal deficit can translate into tenths per lap, and at this level, that's the difference between fighting for victory and fading into the pack. There are also whispers in the paddock that the garage tension has not been purely emotional. Strategic disagreements have reportedly surfaced, particularly around how quickly Marquez should return to full race intensity. Engineers tend to think in data and progression. Champions like Marquez think in instinct and urgency. That clash, while not uncommon, feels amplified under current circumstances. Looking across the grid, rivals are watching closely, but not necessarily celebrating. Marquez at full strength raises the level of the entire championship. Without him at his peak, the competitive dynamic changes. Riders who once measured themselves against his benchmark are now facing a different kind of uncertainty. How to define dominance in a field where the reference point is no longer stable? The psychological dimension cannot be overstated. Elite athletes often speak about the thin line between confidence and doubt, and injuries have a way of blurring that line. For Marquez, who has already endured multiple career-threatening setbacks in the past, this latest episode may not be about fear, but about fatigue. The repeated cycle of recovery, expectation, and reinvention takes its toll, even on the strongest minds. Yet, history suggests writing him off would be premature. Marquez has built a career on defying logic, returning from injuries, adapting to new machinery, and consistently finding performance where others see limitation. The question now is not whether he can come back, but whether he still wants to endure what that comeback requires. Another factor looming over the situation is age, not as a limitation, but as a variable. At 33, Marquez is no longer the fearless prodigy who burst onto the scene. Experience brings intelligence, but also awareness. He understands the risks more clearly than ever, and that awareness inevitably influences decision-making on track. The Spanish Grand Prix, therefore, takes on added significance beyond points and podiums. It will serve as a window into Marquez's current state, how he manages race distance, how he responds under pressure, and whether that instinctive aggression re-emerges when the visor goes down. Observers will be analyzing not just lap times, but intent.